In the quiet aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic, when streets no longer echoed with ambulance sirens and masks began to fade from daily life, the world felt a brief illusion of safety. Yet beneath that calm, a question persisted in the minds of scientists, philosophers, and ordinary citizens alike. What if the next pandemic cannot be contained? What if the next pathogen spreads faster than our science can understand? The fear is not fantasy. Every minute, 105 people die across the planet. Every year, humanity loses around 55 million lives, and nearly 78% of those deaths are caused by disease rather than conflict or accident. Biology, not war, remains the quiet executioner of civilizations. Infectious diseases have always existed, but the balance between infection and immunity has never been stable. A virus, unlike a living creature, is not alive in the traditional sense. It is a molecular code, a packet of genetic information that replicates only when it hijacks a host. Every replication introduces errors mutations that can transform a mild virus into a catastrophe. Antibiotics cannot stop it. Vaccines race against its evolution, sometimes winning, sometimes failing. Even in our most advanced laboratories, the line between control and collapse is thinner than we admit. When you breathe, the air you inhale carries invisible histories of every epidemic before you. The flu that sweeps through a city each winter is not entirely new. It is the descendant of countless viral ancestors, mutating each season to evade recognition. The speed of mutation, measured in hours rather than centuries, makes viruses the fastest evolving entities on Earth. For every adaptation humanity develops, nature answers with 1,000 countermoves. Our immune systems learn, forget, and relearn in a ceaseless biological arms race. Imagine a pathogen that crosses the threshold of unpredictability, not merely contagious, but relentlessly adaptive own, that spreads not through contact or droplets, but through breath alone, carried by air currents over oceans, through ventilation systems, through the very molecules we depend on for life. Modern medicine, rooted in the logic of isolation and sterilization, would crumble against such a force. Hospitals would overflow within days. Emergency systems would fracture under panic. In New York, Los Angeles, or Chicago, once orderly cities would devolve into confusion, as doctors fall sick beside their patients and morgues fill faster than they can be emptied.
The IV is dry. Check the cart again.
The illusion of safety that technology offers us, the vaccines, the antibiotics, the global communication depends entirely on the assumption that nature plays by predictable rules. But nature has never signed such a contract. Each mutation, each microscopic deviation, is a roll of cosmic dice. Even the slightest misstep in a genome of billions of nucleotides can create a monster. A harmless strain of influenza can evolve into something that turns lungs to glass and hearts to silence within minutes. Pandemics do not merely kill, they reorder societies. They expose the hidden architecture of civilization, showing how dependent we are on fragile systems of transport, medicine, and communication. When the networks fail, so does the illusion of progress. Supermarkets empty, hospitals run out of oxygen, governments issue emergency decrees no one obeys. The pandemic becomes not just a biological event, but a moral and social 1EA mirror held up to humanity's arrogance. Science fiction often imagines the apocalypse as sudden, fiery, and loud. In truth, the end could arrive quietly, carried by something too small to see, too fast to stop. A single cough in one city could ignite a chain of infections circling the globe in less than 72 hours. Quarantine zones would crumble under human desperation. Flights would be grounded, yet the virus would already be everywhere. By the time borders close, it would be inside the nation, bloodstream of millions. To understand how close we have come before, one only needs to look at history. Each century has its own biological reckoning. The Spanish flu of 1918, the Black Death of the 14th century, and the ongoing struggle with HIV remind us that pandemics have shaped our civilization as much as wars or inventions. The difference now lies in our population density, our global travel, and our interconnected dependence. In a world of 8 billion people, the next outbreak would not stop at border sit, would rewrite the definition of civilization itself. And so, as scientists model future pathogens and governments rehearse response plans, the haunting truth remains. Humanity's dominance on Earth has always depended on a microscopic truce with nature. A truce that can be broken without warning, without mercy, by a single strand of altered DNA or RNA. The line between survival and extinction has never been thicker than a breath. Every generation believes its trials are unique, yet history's graveyards whisper otherwise. The story of humanity is inseparable from the story of disease. For every empire built, a pandemic has stood ready to dismantle it. When people speak of the end of days, they often imagine fire or flood, but the truest apocalypse in our history has arrived through the breath of the dying. In the spring of 1918, as World War I reached its final convulsions, an invisible enemy slipped silently through the trenches of Europe. Soldiers coughed into their masks, thinking it was dust or exhaustion, but the virus they carried, later called the Spanish flu, would kill between 50 and 100 million people within a single year. It did not care for sides, faiths, or borders. It infected kings and beggars, generals and farmers alike. In just months, the global population fell by nearly 5%. Families watched loved ones turn blue, lungs drowning in their own fluids, as medical science, still young and unprepared, stood powerless. Entire towns lost their doctors before they could treat the sick. Bodies were buried in mass graves dug by the few still standing. When the plague subsided, humanity promised never to forget, but memory is short. 5 centuries earlier, another catastrophe had reshaped civilization even more profoundly. In the year 1347, ships arrived in Europe from the east, carrying an invisible terror, Yersinia pestis, the bacterium responsible for the Black Death. Within 3 years, between 30 and 60% of Europe's population was gone. 50 million people vanished in silence, and the survivors saw it as divine punishment. Church bells rang for months without pause. Fear replaced reason. Families abandoned one another. Priests blessed empty streets while their own bodies trembled from fever. The scale of death was so immense that it changed the course of history. Labor shortages undermined feudalism. Cities reinvented themselves. Art and philosophy turned toward mortality. Yet even as Europe healed, the disease never fully disappeared. It slept in rodents, re-emerging in smaller waves for centuries, reminding humanity that nature forgets nothing. Fast forward to the 20th century, when science had grown confident, and yet another unseen adversary appeared. This one did not strike fast, but instead settled into the bloodstream, quiet, persistent, and cruel. The human immunodeficiency virus, known as HIV, emerged in the 1980s and has since claimed tens of millions of lives. For the first time, the world confronted a plague that carried stigma alongside suffering. Entire communities were judged as much as they were treated. Medicine improved, but compassion lagged behind. AIDS taught the modern world that the enemy was not only biological, it was also moral, cultural, and political. Each pandemic, no matter its era, follows a pattern of denial, chaos, and adaptation. At first, people dismiss the danger. They call it exaggerated, a rumor, a disease of others. Then fear spreads faster than the infection itself, breaking societies from within. Finally, when enough lives are lost, the survivors reshape their world around the lessons learned, stronger in knowledge but weaker in spirit. Humanity has always evolved, not because of strength, but because of pain. The ghosts of these pandemics are not confined to museums or textbooks. They live in the infrastructure we have, built the hospitals, the laboratories, the policies that dictate how we travel and breathe. When you pass through an airport scanner, when you take a vaccination, when you see scientists in sealed suits behind glass, you are witnessing the scars of past centuries. Every mask worn, every quarantine enforced, echoes the lessons of those who once faced the invisible executioners of history. And yet, despite all progress, the same arrogance remains. We believe that antibiotics and data models can outthink evolution, that humanity's intellect can override nature's randomness. But the Spanish flu was born in the heart of industrial modernity, and it still defeated civilization in months. The Black Death ravaged the most religious societies in Europe, showing faith could not outpray biology. And HIV emerged during an age of unprecedented scientific advancement, proving that even the brightest minds can be blindsided by the smallest particle of life. Pandemics are not merely medical phenomena, they are mirrors. They show us who we become when stripped of comfort. Some respond with kindness, others with violence. Entire ideologies are forged in the crucible of disease. After the Black Death came the Renaissance, a rebirth of art and reason born from the ashes of despair. After the Spanish flu came a century of public health revolutions. After HIV came new definitions of empathy, sexuality, and activism. The pattern is cruel, but consistent. Humanity suffers, then grows. But growth has always come at a price, and that price, measured in bodies and memories, is beyond counting. These ghosts walk beside us, unseen yet ever present, whispering reminders that every breath we take is borrowed from the resilience of those who came before. The dead of past pandemics are not gone. They are the foundation upon which our survival stands. But as history has shown, the next wave always comes. The question is not if, but when. In the sterile corridors of modern research facilities, under white light and humming machines, humanity believes it holds mastery over nature. We have decoded genomes, edited embryos, and even resurrected extinct species. Yet the same intelligence that builds miracles also opens doors best left closed. The idea of a supervirus no longer belongs to fiction. It is an outcome waiting for coincidence. Every mutation, every accident, every experiment carries within it the potential to rewrite the story of life on Earth. Viruses are perfect paradoxes, dead and alive at once. They exist as threads of code that manipulate the living to replicate themselves. Unlike bacteria, they do not feed, breathe, or age. They endure. Their simplicity is their weapon. A single strand of RNA, smaller than the width of light itself, can hold enough information to infect millions. While humans measure progress in decades, viruses evolve in hours. That imbalance is the reason no medicine will ever be final. The moment we invent a cure, nature invents a variation. The supervirus begins not with intention but with opportunity. In the world of 21st century science, research laboratories across continents experiment daily with pathogens, mapping them, enhancing them, testing vaccines. A single oversight, a broken seal, a microscopic leak in a ventilation system could become the spark of something unstoppable. Imagine a pathogen engineered to be both airborne and asymptomatic for weeks, spreading invisibly through airports, malls, and subway systems. Its victims would not realize they were infected until too late. By then, the contagion would have encircled the globe. Some scientists whisper about a more unsettling origin. What if the supervirus is not man-made, but the next step in nature's logic? After all, extinction is evolution's most consistent strategy. Every few million years, life resets itself. If humanity has become too dominant, too disruptive, perhaps nature's equilibrium demands correction. A mutation in a remote jungle, a thawing virus released from ancient permafrost, or even a microscopic organism carried by a meteorite could serve as the instrument of balance. Picture the first days of outbreak. It begins somewhere distant, perhaps a small village or a research base near melting ice. A single researcher collapses with a fever no instrument can classify. The symptoms defy patterned lungs intact, organs functional, yet the brain shutting down. Within a week, the contagion crosses oceans. Cities like Los Angeles and New York light up on global infection maps. Travel bans fail as asymptomatic carriers move silently through the world. Panic spreads faster than the pathogen. Governments deploy military quarantines. Economies freeze. The internet fractures into chaos. In hospitals, doctors work without rest, their protective suits fogged with sweat. They attempt to identify the virus's genome, but it mutates faster than their software can track. Each sample yields a new sequence. Vaccines that seem promising in the morning are obsolete by nightfall. The pathogen appears to adapt intentionally, anticipating every human countermeasure. Rumors begin to circulate. Some say it was designed by a rogue state. Others that it emerged from a military experiment gone wrong. Conspiracy theories flourish alongside funerals. Religious leaders interpret it as divine judgment, while scientists see it as biological inevitability. Both, in their own way, are correct. Humanity has lived for centuries, as if the Earth were a laboratory without boundaries. We have modified crops, animals, and even our own DNA. It is only logical that the boundary would one day reverse, that life itself would begin experimenting with us. The emotional toll is beyond measurement. The idea of contagion redefines intimacy. Handshakes and embraces become dangerous. Schools close, cities fall silent, and drones patrol empty highways broadcasting messages of containment. Civilization contracts inward. Nations hoard medical supplies like treasures. The concept of border regains its medieval meaning, a wall against the invisible. The supervirus does not just infect bodies, it infects trust. The foundations of global cooperation crumble when fear replaces empathy. Neighbors become threats, and science becomes weaponized propaganda. Information itself mutates, spreading misinformation faster than facts. In this fog, survival becomes an individual act rather than a collective one. Humanity, for all its intelligence, reverts to its primal instinct, isolation. And yet, within the catastrophe, there remains a haunting realization. The virus, as devastating as it may be, is not evil. It follows the same natural imperative we dodo persist, to adapt, to survive. It mirrors humanity's own ambitions, stripped of morality. In its reflection, we see our own nature, relentless, adaptable, and capable of reshaping the world without understanding the cost. Whether born from a lab or from the soil of forgotten forests, the supervirus becomes a mirror more than a monster. It reveals that our civilization, for all its satellites and microchips, still depends on one fragile defensor's shared sense of responsibility. When that fails, the smallest organism in existence becomes the author of our extinction. When the storm finally arrives, it does not come with fire or thunder. It comes quietly, like a whisper that spreads faster than light. The invisible contagion moves through airports, homes, and cities until every border, every system, and every illusion of control begins to disintegrate. Civilization collapses, not because people stop caring, but because they can no longer function. The first to fall are the hospitals. Overflowing corridors turn into graveyards of white sheets. Nurses faint beside their patients, and doctors, stripped of protection, treat the dying with hands already trembling from infection. Soon, emergency generators run out of fuel, and the hum of ventilators fades into silence. Electricity fails next. The power grid, stretched thin by the absence of workers, fractures city by city. Satellites still orbit above, broadcasting warnings to a species no longer listening. Without electricity, food spoils, water pumps stop, and communications vanish. Governments declare martial law, but soldiers too become victims. The machinery of order rusts faster than it can be repaired. Police stations are abandoned, and military convoys disappear into chaos. The virus becomes not only a biological disaster, but a psychological one. Every cough, a trigger for panic, every shadow a reminder that safety no longer exists. In neighborhoods once bright with life, silence becomes the new language. Windows are sealed with tape and boards. Streets are filled with empty cars, their engines long dead. The air smells of decay and gasoline. In New York, skyscrapers stand as hollow monuments to ambition, their glass facades reflecting the emptiness of the streets below. Los Angeles, the city of dreams, becomes a wasteland of still billboards advertising a world that no longer exists. Across the Midwest, farmland turns wild as tractors rust in fields once rich with harvest. Without people, nature begins its slow reclamation. Within weeks, animals step back into the spaces humanity once ruled. Deer walk through suburban yards, wolves howl in abandoned highways, birds nest in the silent rafters of churches. The earth, freed from human interference, exhales for the first time in centuries. The sky clears as pollution fades. Rivers run clean where factories once poisoned them. For a brief moment, the planet appears to heal itself, even as humanity vanishes. Yet beneath this illusion of restoration lies the haunting truth. The systems we built were not just industrial, they were ecological. The sudden disappearance of billions of humans unbalances everything. Domesticated animals starve, ecosystems collapse, invasive species multiply without control. Survivors hide where they can, some in underground shelters, others in isolated farms or mountain cabins. They ration water, burn furniture for warmth, and scavenge for canned food that will one day run out. Isolation becomes the new economy. Trust becomes the rarest currency. Human contact, once a source of comfort, now carries the risk of death. In a single generation, civilization regresses to its primal roots. Religion resurfaces in strange new forms, mixing science with superstition. Some see the virus as punishment, others as purification. Every belief seeks to make sense of the silence that has replaced the world. The collapse of communication transforms nations into islands. The internet flickers, then dies completely. Satellites drift above, continuing to transmit signals no one receives. Libraries, servers, and data centers repositories of humanity's knowledge fall to dust and moisture. Centuries of information dissolve like breath on glass. The age of digital immortality ends in static. Humanity, once proud of its connectivity, becomes mute. Within months, the great cities of the earth resemble archaeological ruins. Vines wrap around monuments, wildflowers bloom in the cracks of highways. The Eiffel Tower, the Statue of Liberty, and the Great Wall of China stand intact yet meaningless. Without witnesses, history loses context. The virus has erased not just people but memory. The civilization that measured time in seconds now measures survival in heartbeats. For those few who remain, moral order begins to fade. Without governments or shared laws, ethics fracture. Some form small communes dedicated to rebuilding. Others turn to violence, believing resources justify cruelty. Cannibalism, once unthinkable, becomes whispered reality in regions where starvation grips the survivors. Even then, the virus continues its quiet work, evolving faster than the fragile societies rebuilding in its shadow. There is no true immunity, only temporary reprieve. And yet, amid the ruins, a strange beauty persists. The world glows with a kind of post-human serenity. The absence of noise reveals the subtle rhythms of wind and water. The earth continues to spin, indifferent to the suffering of its most intelligent inhabitants. Civilization, for all its complexity, proves to have been no more stable than a spider's web, intricate, magnificent, and easily torn apart. In the end, the collapse is not a moment, but a transformation. Humanity learns that extinction is not a dramatic event, but a gradual surrender. The last lights go out not in a blaze of destruction, but in the quiet acceptance of nature reclaiming what was always hers. The end of humanity does not arrive as a single instant of catastrophe, but as a slow unfolding of silence. Once the last cities fall and the last networks collapse, the planet continues its rhythm as if nothing essential has changed. Yet everything has. The Earth without us becomes both a requiem and a rebirth. In the first few days after the final blackout, the absence of human maintenance reveals its fragility. Subway tunnels flood as pumps stop working. Skyscrapers lose pressure in their water systems. Airplanes, grounded and forgotten on runways, begin to rust in the dew of quiet mornings. At night, the stars unseen for generations behind smog and neon return in billions. The sky glows with a brilliance no living human has ever witnessed before. Within weeks, domestic animals dependent on human care begin to perish or return to feral instincts. Dogs form packs and hunt in the ruins of suburbs. Cattle roam freely, their herds thinning as predators reclaim their ancient territories. Zoos open their cages as caretakers die, and elephants, lions, and gorillas wander out into landscapes never meant for them. In the absence of our dominance, nature begins the slow and indifferent process of reclamation. Trees sprout through cracks in highways. Ivy climbs skyscrapers. Concrete softens under rain, its steel skeleton exposed to rust. The glass towers of Manhattan reflect the sun one last time before their windows shatter under years of storms. After months, nuclear power plants shut down completely. Their backup generators fail, releasing waves of steam and radiation into empty skies. Some regions become wastelands of invisible poison. Others remain untouched, blossoming into sanctuaries where wildlife thrives unbothered. Bears and wolves return to territories long lost. Rivers reroute themselves, carving new paths through what were once human streets. The Earth's atmosphere, free of industrial emissions, begins to cleanse itself. Within 20 years, carbon levels drop to pre-industrial measures. Oceans regain their color, coral reefs recover, and glaciers, though smaller, stabilize under the new equilibrium. Centuries pass, and the architecture of humanity dissolves. The pyramids of Egypt endure, but their inscriptions erode into unreadable whispers. The Great Wall of China crumbles into the mountains it once crowned. The steel skeletons of skyscrapers collapse into dust and vegetation. Even Mount Rushmore, carved as a symbol of permanence, weathers into anonymity. The wind carves new landscapes where once stood megacities. Only the faint geometric patterns visible from orbit grids of highways, the faint outlines of cities beneath forests testify that civilization once existed here. Yet the Earth does not mourn. It simply adapts. The biosphere, released from human interference, accelerates its cycles of evolution. Species evolve to fill the voids left behind. Rats and cockroaches, survivors of centuries of human coexistence, develop intelligence and coordination beyond what science once imagined. Birds sing louder in the absence of engines. Whales reclaim ocean routes once deafened by sonar. The planet begins to heal not in defiance of humanity, but as a continuation of life's endless resilience. For those who once believed in divine prophecy, this moment carries an eerie familiarity. Scriptures spoke of floods, fire, and judgment, yet the true apocalypse unfolds in silence. The end of days is not punishment but balance. It is as if nature, in her timeless patience, restores what was taken. The earth was never ours. We were only its most temporary guests. Our monuments become fossils. Our languages vanish into dust. Time, which we once measured so precisely, dissolves into the eternal rhythm of seasons. 1,000 years after the last human breath, the last traces of our existence are nearly gone. Only a few artificial satellites remain, orbiting a planet that no longer transmits or listens. They flash in the darkness like artificial star-silent witnesses to the species that built them. Future life, whatever form it takes, will look upon them without understanding.
Everything to dust.
To them, we will be mythology, a vanished race of builders who touched the sky and disappeared. And perhaps, somewhere in the cosmic record, a distant civilization receives the faint echo of our final broadcasts. Radio waves traveling through the void may one day reach alien worlds, carrying fragments of our music, our voices, our laughter.
Anyone listening?
For them, humanity will not have died but transformed an electromagnetic ghost drifting among the stars. In that sense, even extinction cannot erase us completely. We continue, scattered across space as signals, waiting to be heard. The Earth without us is not a tragedy, but a revelation. It reminds the universe that life, in all its forms, persists beyond any single species.
We have another incoming trauma, ETA
the
5
forests
minutes.
regrow, the oceans breathe, the stars reflect on waters that no longer fear pollution. And somewhere in the quiet pulse of the planet, there lingers a trace of us not as conquerors, but as witnesses to our own impermanence. When the collapse begins, the instinct to survive overrides philosophy, politics, and even morality. Humanity, scattered and desperate, looks for shelter in places once considered inhospitable.
Hurry up,
Underground
Mama.
facilities, islands, mountains,
We're coming.
and
Slow
deep
down.
sea stations become sanctuaries of last resort. The era of nations ends. The age of survival enclaves begins. Those who can afford a skateboard, private aircraft, or submarines bound for remote territories, while billions have no refuge beyond the crumbling walls of their own homes. Governments, before dissolving entirely, attempt one final act of preservation. In Australia, the outback becomes a network of sealed research colonies. In New Zealand, military convoys guard massive bunkers, carved into limestone hills, designed to operate for decades without outside contact. In Iceland, geothermal energy keeps underground cities warm as the surface freezes and decays. These isolated regions, protected by geography and climate, represent the last functioning pockets of civilization. Yet even within their walls, tension grows. The survivors soon realize that survival is not a triumph, but a prolonged test of endurance. Inside these refuges, life becomes an experiment in isolation.
Move him now.
Air is
We need more bandages over
recycled,
here.
water purified,
Get this man
food grown
stabilized
under artificial
immediately.
light. Children are born who have never seen the sky. They learn of oceans and cities from digital archives and faded photographs. Generations begin to lose memory of the world that came before. The idea of outside becomes mythological, a forbidden realm, filled with radiation, disease, and ghosts. Within these microsocieties, new rules emerge. Some enclaves adopt strict hierarchies to maintain order. Others experiment with democracy or communal living. But every system shares one truth. Fear governs all decisions. Religion, long dismissed by science, finds resurrection in these darkened halls. Survivors reinterpret ancient prophecies through the lens of the catastrophe, the Book of Revelation, the flood of Noah. The plagues of Egypt's metaphors are now treated as history. Some see themselves as the chosen remnants of divine design, entrusted with rebuilding Eden. Others view humanity as a failed experiment that must never repeat its sins. Science itself becomes ritualized, its practitioners elevated to priesthoods of knowledge. The sterile labs of the past transform into temples of remembrance, where microscopes stand beside altars and data servers glow like sacred flames. Outside, the planet continues without us. Storms sculpt the continents, forests overtake highways, deserts swallow entire cities. Satellite imagery stored in forgotten databases shows the slow erasure of civilization roads fading into green coastlines reshaped by rising seas. The few remaining orbital cameras transmit ghostly images of a world healing and forgetting. The contrast is unbearable. Inside, humanity suffocates in artificial light. Outside, life flourishes in wild abundance. As the decades pass, the enclaves grow restless. Supplies dwindle, and psychological strain deepens. The descendants of the first survivors begin to question whether the world above is truly dead. Some insist that the time has come to emerge. Others argue that the surface remains lethal. Disputes turn into schisms, schisms into rebellion. In one Icelandic vault, a group of young explorers defies protocol, ascending to the surface in protective suits. What they find is not a wasteland, but a wilderness untamed, dangerous, yet alive. Birds circle above, rivers run clean, traces of radiation are faint and fading. The Earth, it seems, has outlived the plague that nearly ended everything. But returning to the world proves more difficult than leaving it. Humanity has changed. The body's adapted to filtered air and synthetic food struggle against real sunlight and bacteria. Many fall ill, victims of the very environment that once sustained their ancestors. The survivors of the survivors face a cruel paradox. They are immune to the past, but allergic to the future. Still, a few endure. They rebuild primitive shelters, hunt, and rediscover fire. From their camps, they watch the night sky no longer filled with satellites. Only Starson wonder if they are the last humans left, or the first of something new. In other vaults, contact is lost forever. The deeper bunkers become tombs, sealed by their own safety mechanisms. Generations perish without ever knowing that the world outside has recovered. Their stories end not with catastrophe, but with silence. Yet the memory of refuge, of the desperate will to endure, lingers as a testament to what humanity was willing to do to survive its own creation. Ultimately, the search for refuge reveals the deepest truth about our species. Even at the edge of extinction, we do not seek merely to live, we seek to remember. We build shelters not only for our bodies, but for our stories. In the dark, beneath miles of rock and ice, humans carve their names into steel walls, leaving behind records of their existence for whoever or whatever comes after. It is a final gesture of defiance against oblivion, a message to the cosmos that even in the face of annihilation, humanity tried to endure with meaning. Far to the north, beyond the Arctic Circle, buried in the frozen bones of a mountain lies humanity's quietest monument, the Svalbard Global Seed Vault. It was constructed not for glory but for continuity, conceived in 2008 as an insurance policy for the planet's future. The vault holds more than 4.5 million seed samples from every corner of the world, preserved at -18 degrees Celsius under layers of ice and reinforced concrete. To the untrained eye, it looks like a geometric wedge of metal and stone, jutting out of the tundra like the prow of a ship caught in time. To those who understand its purpose, it is both a tomb and a cradle. In the age before collapse, when nations still cooperated, scientists recognized that food, not weapons or money, would decide the fate of civilization. Wars could end, ideologies could change, but the extinction of crops would mean the extinction of life itself. And so they built the vault deep inside a Norwegian mountain on the island of Spitsbergen, chosen for its political neutrality, geological stability, and eternal cold.
There's enough for everyone.
Even if the power failed, the permafrost would keep its contents preserved for centuries. The Svalbard Vault became the world's genetic ark, holding the blueprint of everything humanity had cultivated: rice from Asia, maize from the Americas, wheat from the Middle East, and barley from Africa. When the great pandemic arrived and the world fell silent, the vault remained untouched. The last teams of scientists who sealed its gates understood that they might never return. They uploaded the final inventories, locked the steel doors, and disappeared into history. Within weeks, Svalbard was buried under blizzards that erased all tracks of civilization. The hum of refrigeration stopped, but the cold itself became the guardian of life. Inside those dark chambers, millions of seeds slept in absolute silence, waiting for hands that might never come. Years turned into centuries. Above, the vault, ice thickened and fractured. Glaciers shifted, reshaping the landscape. Polar bears prowled over what was once human territory. The metal entrance, once illuminated by a blue beacon, was buried under layers of frost. The world outside changed beyond recognition, yet within the mountain, time stood still. The seeds endured, their DNA intact, their potential preserved. Even after humanity's disappearance, the vault remained as a whisper of intent, a statement that we once cared enough about the future to plan for it. Then, one day, the silence broke. Centuries after the last transmission from orbit, movement stirred in the Arctic air. A group of survivors, descendants of those who had once sought refuge in the underground colonies of Iceland and Norway, made their way across the ice. Guided by fragments of old maps and half-remembered myths, they discovered the faint metallic outline protruding from the snow. The vault's entrance, though frozen shut, still existed. They chipped away for days, their breath forming ghosts in the cold, until finally the door opened with a sound that echoed like thunder through the mountain. Inside, the air was dry and sterile. The survivors moved slowly, guided by the dim glow of solar lanterns. They passed through tunnels lined with reinforced steel until they reached the central chamber, a vast hall of shelves and boxes, stretching into darkness. The temperature was still below freezing. In their gloved hands, they held the future. Within those tiny capsules of life lay the power to restore what had been lost. They found rice, beans, corn, barley, and countless species of plants no one among them had ever seen or tasted. For the first time in generations, hope felt tangible. Rebuilding would not be easy. The soil outside was still frozen, and radiation lingered in parts of the world. Yet, with careful cultivation, they began to plant seeds in sheltered valleys warmed by geothermal vents. The first shoots of green broke, through the ice like a heartbeat returning to a corpse. Seasons passed, and fields once barren began to shimmer with color again. Humanity, fragile but persistent, had found its second genesis in the legacy of its ancestors. The vault, however, remained more than a storeroom. It became sacred ground. Pilgrims from surviving enclaves journeyed there, calling it the Ark of Life. They lit fires in the snow, sang hymns to forgotten gods, and carved their stories into the mountain walls. To them, this place was proof that the human race, even at the brink of extinction, refused to surrender its compassion for the unborn. In time, myths would replace memory, and the seed vault would become legenda story told to children about how their kind once outsmarted death. In a sense, Svalbard was humanity's final prayer to the cosmos. It said that we understood impermanence, yet chose to resist it through preservation. It said that even when we could not save ourselves, we tried to save what fed us. And perhaps, in some distant age, when another species finds the vault buried in permafrost, they will open it and discover not just seeds, but the ghost of a civilization that once dreamed of eternity. Long after our final cities have vanished and our monuments have eroded into dust, the question remains, what comes after humanity? The earth will continue to turn, warmed by a distant sun, cooled by eternal night, but the memory of mankind will fade into geology. If another species inherits the world, it will not find our faces carved in stone, but our traces written in the molecular echoes we left
and the
behind.
Scriptures foretell
The plastics in
that
the
when
soil,
the shadow falls
carbon
darkest,
in the air,
the
the silent
faithful
machines
shall find
orbiting
the path
above.
through the ruin.
Our legacy will not be the skyscraper or the spacecraft, but the imbalance we introduced and the resilience that survived it. Some biologists suggest that evolution will not end with us. It will merely shift its focus. Perhaps intelligent life will rise again, not from primates, but from creatures that thrive in our absence: octopuses, adapting to land, birds developing language, or insects evolving collective consciousness. Others believe artificial intelligence, left unmonitored, may one day awaken fully aware yet directionless, wandering through the empty networks of the planet, seeking purpose in the ruins of human data. In either case, the next intelligence will inherit a lesson carved in extinction. Knowledge, without wisdom, is as destructive as ignorance. For theologians, the question takes a more metaphysical turn. If humanity was created in the image of something divine, does that divinity perish with us, or does it move on? The scriptures spoke of resurrection, of renewal after judgment, but perhaps that renewal belongs not to us, but to life itself. In that way, the apocalypse is not an end, but a transition, a divine reset, where creation continues, reshaped by the ashes of its predecessors. Every ending, after all, feeds another beginning. The philosophers of the old world once debated whether civilization was progress or hubris. Looking back from the silence that follows, the answer may lie somewhere in between. Humanity achieved wonders. It mapped the stars, split the atom, cured disease, and reached the moon. Yet it also failed to master the simplest art of coexistence with nature, with each other, with itself. The end of humanity is not written in fire, but in irony. We were undone by the same intelligence that made us extraordinary. And yet, in the vast timeline of the cosmos, our extinction will be nothing more than a pausia of brief silence in the universal symphony. In the cold vacuum between stars, our radio waves will drift for millennia. Somewhere, perhaps light years away, another civilization may one day capture the faint signal of a forgotten broadcast, a fragment of our music, a human voice saying, "Good morning," or a child's laughter echoing across the void. In that moment, we will exist again, not as bodies or nations, but as sound immortal and anonymous.
The dragon, with its
If consciousness
fiery breath,
itself is the universe
guarded
observing
the
its own
ancient
beauty,
forest for 1,000
then humanity has
years.
already fulfilled its purpose. We looked at the stars and wondered. We built stories, faiths, and equations to explain them. Even as we vanish, that curiosity remains our true monument. It does not erode, it travels. It whispers through the molecules of every seed we saved, through every idea we passed forward. The end of the human story is not extinction. It is transformation. We become memory, and memory becomes matter. Perhaps, someday, the descendants of earth weather born of flesh, circuit, or something entirely new will uncover our remnants and ask the same question we once asked of those before us. Who were they? And what did they believe? In that question lies the continuity of existence, the proof that curiosity never dies. The story will begin again, not with us, but because of us. And so, if there is any comfort to be found in the thought of our absence, it is this: the universe does not mourn, it evolves. Life, in all its infinite forms, will continue the song we began. Thank you for watching until the end of this journey through the possibilities of humanity's fate. What do you think will truly come after use rebirth, replacement, or nothing at all? Share your thoughts in the comments, and let's keep this conversation alive, even in the shadow of the apocalypse.